Okay, not to waste any time, let's get today's webinar started. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all, wherever you are in the world, and welcome to this week's edition of the Thursday Talk webinars on DME for Peace. Yes, after a brief vacation, I'm back in the hot seat. My name is Jack Farrell, for those of you who are new to the Thursday Talks. I'm the DME for Peace project manager at Search for Common Ground, and I'm going to be your host today. I'm joining you from the beautiful Rostrevor, County Down in Ireland, where we have just been hit by a mega storm. So if my Wi-Fi cuts out, I really apologize. Welcome to the second webinar in our series with the One Earth Future Foundation on their approach to measuring program impact. For those of you who missed last week's webinar that set the scene for today's discussion, OEF's approach extends beyond assessments, evaluations, and surveys to integrate robust outcome-focused monitoring systems into all programs from their inception. Through trial and error over the course of its decade-long history as an incubator of international peacebuilding and peacemaking programs, the organization has found value in this approach on multiple fronts. Embedding the practice in program development and implementation has proven to have payoffs that are at least twofold for individual programs, as well as providing the collective benefit organizationally. This benefit is also a huge sort of aspect of why their partners are also successful. Today, we're joined again by last week's guests, John Bellish and Lindsay Hager, as well as their OEF colleagues, Juan Fernando Lucio and Andrei Sabato, for today's webinar on advancing programmatic outcomes through monitoring, exploring PASO Colombia. Just a note, if you have a question during today's presentation, you can write it on the question function on your GoToWebinar dashboard, and we will address it once we reach the Q&A. To my OEF friends, welcome to and welcome back to the Thursday Talks. I'm now going to hand over to John to get the ball rolling, and John, feel free to take it away when you're ready.
Great, thanks, Jack. That was a really wonderful introduction. And given that we didn't have as much time as we wanted for questions last time, I'll make this really brief. Just to say, last week we made sort of the abstract case for an embedded monitoring approach. This week, we're going to dig into this case study with PASO Colombia. And then next week, we're going to drill down yet further to talk about kind of the nuts and bolts of how this works. So I think for those of you who missed last week, I don't think the order really matters. You could just as easily watch this one first and go back and watch the next one, but I do think both of them paired together will really round out the understanding. So with that said, I'll turn it quickly over to Juan Fernando Lucio, the director of PASO Colombia, to start the presentation.
Thank you very much, John. Big hello to Jack. Greetings to everybody on the webinar. This presentation makes me very excited because I come from the monitoring and evaluation work. Before joining One Earth Future, I was part of the team for the monitoring and evaluation of an $80 million program. It is a USAID program on governance. And it is starting how the differences in M&E cultures can be. But I do remember that at that time, basically the way monitoring and evaluation was being constructed was basically on a very sort of data approach. So you have a logic model. The logic model has inputs, outputs, outcomes, and impacts. And the role of M&E is really to extract sufficient data to see how logistically, technologically to extract data in order to make sure that this logic model was actually carried out. The reason behind it is that, you know, there's a contract with the United States government. There are lots of implications about that. But the problem with when an approach is only like sort of logic model based is that there are problems that we deal with, like peace, like development, where models have to be iterated, where the ideas you start with at the beginning are not the same ideas that you have to carry out throughout the process, and how to make sure that you're iterating and at the same time maintaining the trust of the different stakeholders involved. And so you know, I greet very much this opportunity to sort of see, you know, that what we have built with OEF and PASO is embedded. It's more dynamic. It allows for making changes along the way, and I think that is one of the values. But just to give you one small idea, I want to address slide number 13 about the type of missions that we conduct. So PASO Colombia, as you see on the slide, facilitates sustainable peace by coordinating collaborative projects. We go into territories, we set up these spaces, and the spaces become like the hub of interaction between different stakeholders and the beneficiaries or partners, in this case, ex-combatants, government, people in processes of migration, and people in processes of eradication of COVID. We started in December 2015, and now we have 20 reincorporation of these areas in 10 municipalities, and we span 30 territories across the country. We have over a little less than 5,000 people in total that we serve, including 1,532 people in areas, 807 people that participate in larger commercial projects. We have 55 partner organizations have it started and work on 91 different productive projects. And so you can imagine the demands that this creates so far as accounting for the outcomes and for monitoring what goes on all over the country in this large network. So I'd like to address the timeline. We can see that by that a programmatic and M&E timeline for PASO, and it shows the evolution of the program on the upper side of the slide, and it is compared to the evolution of the M&E program. So on top you see what happens on the program, and at the bottom you see the response of this embedded M&E team together with the PASO team. So I would like to start by talking about the programmatic PASO's experience from 2016 to 2017, when the reincorporation process in Colombia was started. So let's turn first to 2017. So you have a peace budget that was announced, a very large $2 billion project to begin with, and it was supposed to be invested in productive projects through a set of organizations with presence in territories and articulated through the Colombian Peace Fund. PASO Colombia, having developed a very close relationship with the Ministry of Post-Conflict, supported the building process of a more direct bridge between the ministry and the vast set of local stakeholders. So at that time, we needed to account for the government. Our M&E, our implicit user of the M&E at that point was really the government and the public authorities in the territories. And our mission was to show that there were sufficient opportunities for ex-combatants to be reincorporated. The link departed then from the identification of 911 possible economic initiatives so that the ex-coms could carry out their socioeconomic reincorporation activities. We wanted to diminish the level of distrust regarding the peace process because for many people in cities and for campesinos, many ex-combatants, or having so many ex-combatants, would mean that they would erode the already existing social funds or funds for social development. So this first effort was to provide sufficient trust and to provide elements for coordination. We will see after that we had to completely change our frame of mind, because the famous $2.1 billion or $2 billion investment didn't take place. We had the ex-combatants on the ground. There was an increase in distrust about the results of the peace process, and so we had to pivot to a different strategy. And this is how in 2018, this drop of water that you see on the screen shows up. And this was actually, our plan B. So we no longer can sort of count on available funding from the central government, and so we have to do something different. And we start implementing with our own resources and gathering together the other factors of production a series of productive projects after a year of having started the reincorporation process. So PASO saw the need to start the productive activities by identifying the five key factors: land, capital, labor, knowledge, and markets. By that time, PASO faced two challenges. On the one hand, the limited resources, given that the national government did not directly would invest. And on the other hand, no public information was available about reincorporation and population. So it was really hard to get to the facts: how many ex-combatants, what were the necessities, what was going on, etc., etc. And this all became the challenge for the M&E component. So, I now turn it to Andres, who is going to give a brief introduction about the M&E component of this operation.
Thank you, Juan. Hello, everyone. My name is Andres Ciabato. I'm the Senior M&E Specialist, and I work for ILA department since 2018. I'm based in Colombia. And I would like to start saying that by late 2017 and early 2018, the M&E component for PASO Colombia started to be developed. It was at that time necessary to have a consistent, reliable, and evidence-based information about the performance of the program, being the monitoring system independent, but at the same time integrated into the administrative and programmatic processes. And this is basically what we call the embedded nature of our monitoring systems. So a group of 55 indicators was set up, as well as the tools and data quality protocols, and a set of around 10 indicators initially called key accomplishment metrics, now known as objectives, were prioritized with specific annual targets. We argue that this is an integrated monitoring scheme because the measurement framework, well, a part of being, let's say, articulated into the administrative and programmatic processes, the measurement framework was a co-creation between the program and other departments, such as ILA and strategy, and independent in the sense that every single data is supported by evidence, follows data quality protocols, and are validated and processed by the ILA department. The M&E system also became a means of communication between the program and the foundation, with its main governing bodies, namely the board and executive team, and between PASO and other stakeholders. It allows to answer basic questions about the intervention. For instance, the number of jobs created, the amount of leverage funds, the number of partners and its type, among other variables. In late 2018, the perception of participants about the area's processes started to be measured by a satisfaction survey. This information allowed the program to identify, for instance, the types of access to land, and shift in some way the understanding of the land problem in the reincorporation process, from a property of land perspective to a more nuanced scope, highlighting the importance of the access and use of land for productive purposes. Also, it allowed to identify programmatic changes and iterations, for instance, in cooperatives membership and organizational strengthening actions needed to improve and boost transparency and accountability within ExCom's cooperatives. This information was used by the program to design specific communication pieces, such as the PASO pitch book, as a means to boost the stakeholders' engagement, and many other strategies. But we will turn again to Juan in order to know more about the next programmatic evolutions and challenges of PASO, particularly in 2019 and 2020.
Thank you very much, Andres. Yes, as a matter of fact, presenting the program in numbers became a very important asset for us. Particularly in 2019, the program started a scaling process, adding more complexity to the intervention in terms of numbers, territories, participants, partners, funds, very, very much more complex, more national, and the type of productive and commercial initiatives it supported. It went from fisheries sort of services to such a niche like new products, new exotic Amazonic products, etc., and with different populations. In 2020, PASO reached 20 areas and started to explore the effectiveness of the model with different types of populations and these territories, for instance, coca eradication populations. To develop this process, more detailed and integrated information was needed, allowing to monitor the activities on a case-by-case basis. To this end, the areas developed a dashboard that was designed and implemented by the M&E team in conjunction with the strategy team. So I would like John to introduce this specific tool and tell us more about its added value from a programmatic perspective. John?
Great, thanks, Juan. So Andrei is opening up the Big Era Dashboard. This is the tool that I use to keep track of these 20 eras across the country. This is the most robust dashboard that we have at OEF. It's the culmination of over 2 years of data, a lot of iteration to understand the strategy and what matters. But what we've ended up with is a really useful tool, basically for management and shared understanding, especially between a remote office and the field. So one of the things that you can do, obviously, is look at quarter-to-quarter comparison. Most of our work in the eras are agricultural projects, which are cyclical in nature. So it's a useful tool to look at. Right now we have highlighted Q4 2018. So you can see 10 eras, and you can see that the kind of mix. Now we look at Q4 2019, more eras, more participants, more sales and savings, etc. You can also zoom in to one era and look at changes over time in a more micro level. So now we're looking at our Tuluá era, which is in the west of Colombia, and you can see what I just want to highlight is the bar graphs in the bottom center. They're doing a lot of food self-sufficiency, growing some chickens and growing some pigs. And then when we add Q4, you can see this big addition of sales of coffee. So this tells me a couple of things. The first is that the ability of the cooperatives to sign contracts is, if not robust, at least starting to happen. 143 million pesos is significant. And it also shows me we're adding diversification, which is really important in terms of sustainability and resilience. So it's not just sales numbers. The other thing that I really like about the way we have this set up is the qualitative component. So we're going to zoom into the qualitative highlights. So we have a network of agricultural extensionists, the extensionistas, that are really permanently in the field and are our kind of last mile connection with the eras on a day-to-day basis. What we do is we ask them once a month, what's the one thing we should know about each era? As that changes, that gives me a great sense of what to talk to Juan about. Andres, if you could scroll down to the Anori from June, just really quickly. I just want to give him from June, for the one before. Yeah. No, well, okay. Anyway, the point that I was going to highlight was just that I believe it was the honey cooperative and the coffee cooperative decided to form their own, basically formed a joint venture, right? So that's something that, okay, that's new. I know it just happened. I can talk to Juan about it, see what it means. And then the last thing that I just want to highlight before I turn it back over is updates on security. This is another thing that is not quantitative per se, but we've got the team again in the field with our security officers, I can see how the security score has increased in this case over the past 3 months, and that it is not in a great security situation right now, and why. So all that's to say that this is really what you can end up with if you take this monitoring approach and stick to it. It has really helped me not only develop a shared understanding with Juan, who's in Colombia, and I'm here in Colorado. It's given me a really granular data set, basically, to use for conversations. And that's the last point I'll make before I turn it over, is that there's nothing magic about any of these graphs changing. What you have to do is have an organizational culture, basically, where you're using the data, you're thinking, the manager's thinking about it, asking questions, having conversations, and that's where you get really generative discussions between the home office and the field office, even without me flying down to Colombia, which in these COVID times is absolutely essential. So that's just a little quick tour, and with that, I'll turn it over, I think, to Juan to continue the evolution.
Thank you very much, John. You know, everybody evolves in these types of programs. Like the expectations of the partners and beneficiaries evolve. We as a program evolve. This is a learning experience for everybody. And as the program evolves and some aspects of the peace components are more consolidated, there are new doors of inquiry and action that open up. And in that respect, the ERA model faces today specific challenges and questions associated to its evolution. On the one hand, for instance, the broad question about sustainability. You know, of these 91 productive projects, how many are sustainable? How many will be efficient? How much are we subsidizing them? On the other hand, the challenge of a deeper integration at the national level of the 30 territories and the 5,000 participants. Plus the ability of the program to scale to much larger amounts of participants. The ILA program strategy and PASO are currently working on how to provide sound monitoring basis for it, how to accompany the construction of this national network from the measurement perspective, what to do of what, according to what we call the network of hope, which is all these hubs working in coordination and in a system. So I'd like to give the opportunity to Lindsay, to John and Andrei to tell us how they are addressing these challenges. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Juan. Well, I just want to mention that one of the, let's say, current developments in terms of measurement is the sustainability metrics. Basically, through a set of workshops with the program and with different departments, we identify 5 key factors related to sustainability, which are production, commercialization, capital engagement, leadership and administration, and social integration. And based on these factors and dimensions, we are in the building process of 11 indicators, let's say index for sustainability. And I would like to highlight also that in all this process and exercise, one of the most, let's say, insightful things that I can mention is that we are integrating contextual information on relevant variables for the program. For instance, the income levels in rural Colombia, how the peasants in Colombia are doing with income, and have identified some specific data points and reference data references for the rural context in the country. And this is part of the effort that we are building through this sustainability reflection and metrics. I don't know, John, Lindsay, do you want to also complement this current reflection and discussion about sustainability?
Well, one thing that I just want to note about it, I don't have much to add on the substance, is that it would have been hard, if not impossible, for us to build something like this right now from scratch. It really was the upfront investment in the data infrastructure, the baseline data, and really the shared understanding that has allowed us to do this. So with a couple of half-day sessions with the leadership of PASO, a little bit of work after the fact, we were able to come up with these indicators, most of which we already had, and most of the ones that we didn't were kind of generated externally. So that's kind of the theme that I have seen in this approach, has been kind of invest up front for a payoff at the end, really based on the built-in infrastructure, the baseline data, and then the shared understanding that has to be generated between me, which is operating from the foundation perspective, and Juan and his team operating from the program perspective. And it really is all of that together that makes something like this possible.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that, if I may. I want to start taking questions pretty soon, but one of the things that Andres just mentioned is really relevant, and it's relevant in more than just the Colombian context. With others of our programs, especially our Somali programs, where we're operating in areas where there's not a lot of data, the fact that we are collecting quite a bit of it on our programs means that when another study or when another set of researchers or another program does collect data, we're able very quickly to kind of compare, and at some points compare over time, you know, what we have to what may be a very pointed or kind of spot data collection effort. And that's really beneficial. We found that to be very beneficial in a number of ways. It gives us just kind of one more vantage point that we would not be able to have on our programs and on the context, especially in some of these areas where there's just not a lot of information and not a lot of data available. So I'll wrap it up right there, and I think we should probably open it up for questions. Juan, Andres, unless you have any last minute things you'd like to say.
Let's open up for questions.
Okay.
Okay, well, thank you guys very much for a great presentation. And the questions have already started coming through. So I think this was a good move to shift it towards the discussion. To our audience, this is your time to shine. A couple of notes about our format for those of you who are unfamiliar with the Thursday Talks. You can submit a question in two ways. The first is through the question function on your GoToWebinar dashboard, where you can type your question. The second, you can click on that little hand icon that you have on your dashboard, and that will raise your hand, which will allow us to unmute your microphone so you can ask your question live. When you do submit your question, we ask that you submit your name and affiliation. Just a note, as many of you have asked, these talks are recorded and posted on Demon for Peace's media gallery, so those who are not able to join us at this time can go back and listen to the presentation and the discussion. So our first question comes from Jessica Virna Antipolo. And Jessica writes, is this dashboard online, and what software did you use to construct this dashboard? Do partners and other stakeholders have access to this online dashboard?
So I'll answer it. So Andres, why don't you talk a little bit about the technical side, and then I'll talk about the usage.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. Well, we use, let's say, a diverse set of tools, visualization tools. The current one and what we presented was built on Power BI, but we also have a set of dashboards in Google Suite. And yes, you can share this information with stakeholders and people, let's say, outside your organization. You have just to set up your administrative options of your account, and that's absolutely possible. Yeah.
But the dashboard that I showed you is internal. It's got a level of detail, particularly with the security stuff, that I wouldn't want to just make open. But absolutely, the great thing about these tools, and both of the tools, Power BI and the Google equivalent, whose name escapes me right now, have those great view-only share settings. So I think there's a lot of flexibility in the way that you could share that, and really a lot of granularity in how you do it as well.
Great, thank you guys. One question I've been seeing quite a lot from today's audience, and this sort of is quite tricky. So in the peace building field, according to the most recent sort of surveys and research being done by the Peace and Security Funders Group, most organizations working in this space are operating on grants with a median length of 18 to 21 months. One of the things that I noticed in your work is that you're able to track sort of these programs that have sort of five-year plus timelines. And I wonder if you have any suggestions for organizations on how to best sort of apply this kind of monitoring system or monitoring approach to shorter project timelines, and sort of vis-a-vis at the sort of longitudinal approach.
Yeah.
Take a shot at that.
Lindsay, go, yeah.
Okay. So that is a big difference. It's a big difference between us, sort of OEF, and many in the field. Honestly, the shorter timelines are problematic, especially if a lot of the fundamentals we mentioned in the first talk aren't really sort of adhered to. And to me, the two that are really important is that, when a program starts, it starts with an embedded monitoring system, so that, pretty much immediately we're able to start seeing data roll in, and strategic innovations are really able to incorporate that information as quickly as possible. And the second thing is that embedded system is embedded in the administration plan of the program. I really think that before something sort of is set out into the field or into motion, those pieces are in place. It does require a bit of an upfront effort, and we'll have a presentation next week about what exactly that upfront effort in terms of time and cost looks like. And we'll also talk about how we use different softwares to make connections between different input, data sources, and then eventually where they come out to these dashboards. But honestly, those two things are really crucial. And the other thing is for projects that are shorter term, I would say there's probably something to be said for doing some more research. And we do this through some of our lab functions within the incubator at OEF, is to do more upfront research so that before these projects start, we have information or data available from other similar projects. A lot of us are not operating in a vacuum, and there's a lot of data sharing that could and should happen. I'm sure that there's more of that could and should happen, and that really, if you could integrate that into your outcomes and the data that you want to collect before you get going, you really stand a better shot of being able to innovate towards impact in a useful and an efficient way.
Just to add, they're all really great points. Just to hop on really quickly to add one thing that I'm starting to see that I think could speak to this, right? Because I definitely take the point that step one of doing this can't be transform the way funding works. But at the same time, one of the things that I'm seeing is you can repurpose indicators, right? I think even those of us who are on the 12 to 18-month grants, assuming we have a steady stream of those and that we have some sort of core organizational competency we are using to get those grants, I think that you can reuse indicators, right? And you can even reuse the exact same baseline data, even if it has a slightly different meaning under a new contract. So the way that I've started to see this at OEF is repurposing goals from our results framework, which is the kind of broader social impacts that we want to have, to use in our annual goal setting process. So we're using the same indicator to kind of speak to something a little bit different, but we're still getting that benefit of the upfront investment. So I do think those who want to be a little more forward leaning on this, I'm not going to say it's not without risk, but my experience suggests that most of the monitoring system that you set up in the first 18 months, assuming the next grant is not completely out of left field, would be useful the next time around as well.
Yeah, John, that's a really helpful context, and I think that's something that, you know, at Search for Common Ground we've been pushing towards a lot over the last few years, with the introduction of tools and approaches such as a global impact framework. So we're seeing common indicators across all of our programs to be able to tell a better story of peace and sort of how sort of our interventions are directly translating into conflict transformation. So yeah, I think it's like looking back over time, being able to sort of identify commonalities across different projects and telling that story moving forward. So that was a really interesting answer. So our next question comes from last week's host, Anais Kapoor. And Anais writes, I'd be curious to hear about the sustainability indicators included on your dashboard. And do you continue to monitor them after your programs have ended?
So I think, so to answer the second part first, and then to turn it over to Andres or Juan, who have a more granular knowledge of the sustainability indicators themselves and can talk in a more technical way. The answer is that we're not there yet. None of them are sustainable. We haven't left. And then even more broadly, what we're starting to see is the most advanced eras turn into hubs that are net exporters of value to the communities around that era where we're still working. So I don't suspect we're going to totally lose touch. And I do suspect we would continue to collect data, but hopefully we'll get there. I suspect that we will, and then I can give you a more concrete answer. But does Juan or Andres want to dig in a little bit more to the sustainability indicators themselves and how they were built, and sort of maybe even give a couple of examples?
Okay, yeah, sure, John. I think that actually, as part of the conversations and reflections on the sustainability metrics was, okay, to what extent these metrics can also be used by for instance, the cooperatives or the participants of the eras in the PASO case. And we think that, yes, let's say it would be good and fantastic if after the intervention of PASO, the cooperatives and the members of these projects can also keep tracking some of these dimensions and variables involved here, which are related, for instance, with key components and aspects of their activities, such as the productive activities or the commercialization activities in the case of the era. So that's, let's say, something that this is something still a work in progress, but hopefully this, let's say, measurement framework on sustainability can be used and also other organizations and the participants on themselves can take advantage of this as well. And the second thing I would say that and this is part of the discussions as well that we have had and is related to the type of relationship of the program with participants or with the eras. So basically what we are envisioning is that let's say, along with the evolution of the program, the type of relationship with the communities and with the participants would change. So that's another, let's say, element that we are considering. Juan, if you wish also to complement the answer.
Thank you, Andres. I think that the big challenge around the sustainability question is to understand what really makes one era or one of such hubs sustainable. If you ask a person who is very much based on sort of finance and economics, it will look only at the productive component of the era. If you ask a person who is experts on peace and so on, you know, that person is going to look into the relationships and this feeling of safety and the solidarity elements that go in there. So, you know, in order to accompany the discussions, because this is a discussion that is accompanied by some kind of anxiety, you know, by some of our stakeholders regarding, okay, you know, is what we're doing sustainable? I think that what our monitoring system is providing is some evidence. Like, for instance, as of today, the areas are sustainable because the rate of desertion from our areas is basically zero. So, you know, there is something that makes people remain in spite of the fact that there is danger, that there is assassinations, that there is still a lot of challenges to these people going on, and yet they remain related to this era. So, you know, that is a piece of evidence that is supported with the numbers, with the financials, with the things. The question here is, going into the future, how is what you have learned, or how does what you have learned allow you to foresee the area of sustainability going forward? And that is an element of discussion, and this is why we are looking into the 5 different elements, because we think that these 5 elements have to do with sustainability.
Great, thank you, Andres and Juan. Our next question kind of builds on that, and this comes from Steve Martin, who, for the purposes of this webinar, I'm assuming is the comedian and one of my favorite actors, and I was obviously a big fan of the Thursday Talks. But Steve writes, are the local community, the participants, aware of how important the reporting is, and do they then contribute positively to reporting?
That is a very important question, and it is a key component, especially in the ex-combatant community, because ex-combatants are usually very sort of distrustful of whoever they don't know, and of providing information, etc. And so a lot of information, before you can actually have it, you need to develop relationships of trust with the people so that you can start having information. Otherwise, it's very hard. That's one aspect. And the second aspect is that, you know, the places where we work, official information like government information, that sort of data institutes and so on, they do not operate. So there are big challenges on that sense, but we have been able to overcome these challenges by creating this level and this atmosphere of trust with the data providers. Andres, you have a lot of things to say about that also.
Yes, perhaps just an additional comment, and is that some of the information that we collect, for instance, through the survey, the annual survey, is also available for the participants, for the cooperatives. We after we collect the information, we make a round area by area, or send the information to the key cooperative members, let's say to be sure that they know what was the result, what are the, let's say, key findings, and also as a mean that they can use an asset, information asset that they can use for their activities as a cooperatives or as participants of the era. I think that's another let's say side of the coin that we let's say pay attention, and I think also helps on that trust building factor that Juan just has mentioned.
Thank you, and Juan.
Oh,
Go
sorry.
ahead, Nancy.
I just wanted to add one other thing. Thanks, Jack. That this question is a really big deal beyond just the EDAs and even the PASO program, and it has to do with buy-in and really creating these systems, these monitoring systems, in a collaborative way, right? It makes a big difference that the funder, the administrators, the supervisors, and the programs and the staff all are on the same page about why we're collecting what we're collecting, and how frequently we're going to do it, and what are all of our expectations about what is going to be on the other side. And really, we've seen and we've learned, and sometimes we haven't done very well, but by those mistakes, we've learned, quite frankly, that making sure that that's done in a collaborative way really does ensure the best sort of uptake and use of this information, because it is a lot of information, and we do want to make sure that people are reading it and getting you know, kind of the same things out of it, and they're getting their expectations met. So that John, for example, can reliably go into this and see what he understands as what the program is trying to achieve in the same way that Juan does, in the same way that our funder does. So having that collaboration and being able to collect that data reliably and make sure that we're on the same page is a key part of this entire system.
And I think that is a wonderful way just to wrap up today's discussion, Lindsay. Before we technically wrap up, I want to hand it back to our OEF colleagues to see if you have any closing remarks for today's webinar.
I don't, but
No,
thank
just to thank everybody.
Yeah.
Great.
Thank you.
Well, thank you to Andres, thank you, John, thank you, Juan, thank you, Lindsay, for a wonderful presentation and discussion.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're delighted to have facilitated this discussion, the second partner series. And most importantly, thank you to our audience for joining today's webinar. I know a number of you have asked about the information that was shared today. This recording is going to be posted online on our media gallery this afternoon. So please return to it. Feel free to share it with your colleagues. And if you have any questions, please continue the discussion in the comment section on DB for Peace. I've said it before and I'll say it again, these webinars are the best part of my job. I get to chat with really interesting people like my colleagues at OEF who are changing the world, and then I get to discuss it with you all. So this is really great. We're going to be back next week with the final webinar in our three-part series where both Lindsay and Andres will be back. But we'll also be joined by their colleague Sean Duncan, and they're going to lead a discussion on the nuts and bolts of generating and integrating a monitoring system. Now, I know a lot of you are trying to work out how do you apply the information you've learned over the last two webinars to your daily work. So next week's webinar is a must-see if you're interested. The details of that webinar are in the chat box right now, and we'll be announcing it to the wider DME for Peace community via email. So please register, please join us again, and look forward to seeing you online. Thank you again, everyone. Thank you to the team at OEF. Today was great. And to our audience, look out for each other, take care of each other, and stay healthy.